friends, I'm Sabrina, the rookie around here. John and Dick are the old school American fans of F1. Thanks for taking time to listen in on a conversation that the guys and I had about the US Grands Prix, COTA, Miami, and now Las Vegas. Formula One has increased its footprint in the US from just a few years ago. We might be Texans, but we tried to even-handedly assess whether this expansion is good for F1 now and into the future. Hope you enjoy our conversation. So for Americans joining the sport more recently, I think the flashy US-based races seem to be getting a lot of attention, and maybe it's my skepticism, cynicism, I don't know what the right word is, but it seems like that it's more about getting entertainment, eyes and ears in the American audience because that equals dollars. My question, I guess, to you guys is, it seems like COTA is getting shortchanged and it actually might be the more challenging circuit. I realize Las Vegas is yet to be determined, right? Like to actually see it happen. We have a year of Miami. I want y'all's thoughts. What do you think? Am I onto something or am I losing my mind?
Well, so you're talking to somebody who already is probably clinically insane anyway. So I'm probably not the person to tell you whether you're insane or not or losing your mind. But I'll take a stab at it first. I read an article that was really interesting, and I forget who it was, but somebody was saying that when it comes to providing entertainment and spectacle, nobody does it better than Americans. I think it's a little bit of the genetics of P.T. Barnum are probably, ingrained in an awful lot of Americans, right? And so we always go for the show and the flash and all that, and then everybody else kind of tries to copy us. Think about Hollywood, right? I mean, there's more movies and TV shows are produced in Hollywood than anywhere else, I think. And so, it's sort of, there is certainly a level of leadership in that area around entertainment and sports. And I think, the line between sport and entertainment just gets increasingly blurry with each passing year. And so, it's no big surprise that if you look at Miami and now Las Vegas, they're going after a real high-end demographic. In fact, Las Vegas was criticized for not having any general admission tickets. None. There are none for this year's race. And they're kind of like, yeah, I think we kind of missed that one. And the answer is, yeah, y'all did, because there's a lot of fans who would go to see that spectacle of, Formula One cars going, 180, 200 miles an hour past the Bellagio fountains. I mean, at night, that's going to be amazing. But there's a lot of us that, I'm not spending $4,000 for a ticket, it's just not happening. So, I think that there's that piece of it. And of course, I would also say that I have read that like Miami wanted to very much to differentiate itself from COTA. That they wanted to go more for the Monaco kind of feel, high end, very exclusive, that sort of thing. Whereas COTA, permanent racetrack, certainly there's some sections there, like I'm thinking, John, like, the S's, seriously challenging for a racing driver. Whereas you have a street circuit, most of the corners are going to be, right angled kind of corners, right? And 90 degrees. And so, but you're also driving through a concrete canyon. I think, from a technical standpoint as a driver, I think that COTA is probably the bigger challenge, except when you get it just a little bit wrong. And then like any street circuit, you get pitched off into the barriers and your day is done. The only thing that I would throw in there is if you remember at Miami last year, they had a real challenge with the track surface itself, just the way the asphalt was actually mixed. And I know that it caused the engineers and the drivers all sorts of headaches having to deal with that. But that's not a layout issue. That's just, they went with the wrong they went with the wrong asphalt, quite frankly. I believe they had to spend several $1 million to correct it. I could be wrong on that one, though.
Okay, John, what about you?
Well, the 2 points to the question. One is about the money, and the CEO of Liberty Media announced in the last day or so that the commercial director for Liberty tripled sponsorship on the back of Formula One's rise and the Miami Grand Prix coming online and Las Vegas now coming online. He added that they expect the commercial director to triple sales again in the next 3 months, not 3 years. So they see these races, Las Vegas, Miami, as really big for bringing sponsor money in as well as for the entertainment value. So it's a business, and that's a business approach, and that's one of the reasons they're doing it. The races like COTA, in comparison to Miami and Las Vegas, is much more sustainable from my point of view because it's a permanent circuit. And so you don't run into community issues on sound or objections from this group or that group that may or may not have serious concerns about environmental issues or whatever else. You don't have other events competing for the same space, so there's that. So I see the permanent circuits as being more sustainable, although if you look at Monaco and Baku, the street circuits can be very interesting and exciting, and there's certainly places that countries or cities can show themselves off, and that seems to be what Las Vegas has opted to do. And as Dick said, Miami has done a similar sort of, presenting themselves as a jewel to be seen and visited and associated with Formula One.
Okay, so let me ask you on that. On one of our earlier conversations, we talked about the calendar itself. And what my takeaway from your perspective was less would be good on the calendar. And your primary driver was the wear and tear toll it takes on the actual, what I think it was Dick who called it the circus, right? The actual people who are part of the circus. So right. I guess what I'm leading to is if you're going from that mindset, it's about quality versus quantity. It seems like maybe the quantity aspect is what drives in that revenue, but I think what you're highlighting is the sustainability of that, both in revenue coming in and even the toll that it's going to take on the circus players to actually keep this going at the level that everyone will expect. But is that an accurate
that's
kind
largely
of summation?
True, but that's largely on point. The other thing, which I didn't mention in the earlier conversation, is the budget cap. And if you're going to increase the number of races, but you're going to maintain the budget cap on the teams, then you're making it practically impossible for them, especially in terms of some of the adjustments that can be made, are bringing on additional team members, cross-training them, and swapping them out between races and that sort of thing. So it becomes a budgetary issue as well as just a grinding the personnel down.
And so then if it were to drop down the races, it seems like that COTA has a lot of built-in things that will give a quality race because of the way that it is that permanent circuit. And I guess what I'm trying to understand, and that's why you're hearing the hesitancy, is what is the really, outside of the revenue, what is the value proposition of Miami and Las Vegas? I mean, is it really a challenging track?
Dick, you want to hit that?
I think Miami is, because I mean it needs some revisions, and I believe that those were exposed. There were several turns where the track was too narrow, or it was just laid out incorrectly, and they needed to revise it. But remember, there's part of that track that is not city streets, but it's actually purpose built around Hard Rock Stadium. Specifically for the F1 race. And so I think that's that's something that you have to kind of keep in mind too, is that you could call Miami a semi-permanent track. But then on the other hand, Vegas is completely a temporary circuit, other than the fact that they're spending millions and millions of dollars building the garages and all the infrastructure that's needed, to support the race in Vegas.
I guess I guess as I watched Miami last year, I wasn't really impressed by it.
Right.
Maybe that's coming out in my question, because it just didn't seem to have, outside of what I think you highlighted was the concrete, and I think the big thing that kept being discussed and you could see it was the porpoising. I just thought, what's keeping me entertained, or what is it showing me about the skill of the drivers, or about what the teams have built and are setting up the car for this year? And it just it just seemed like, oh, this is just more about the eyeballs, and that's what I picked up as a more novice racing enthusiast. And so then it made me wonder, well, if I was the person who had paid attention, like what I feel like with you guys have been lovers of motorsport and Formula One long before it became cool, when it was hard to be a sports enthusiast for Formula One because it wasn't really on the sports networks. Yeah. You had to really be aggressive in trying to keep up with all of this. Now you have these tools. It is kind of cool, but it seems like it's diluting that, which was the thing that made it so amazing. John, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think that's absolutely on point. It is diluting it. Those of us who are hardcore longtime fans recognize that. And to us, it's why we get a little nostalgic. But the other side of the coin is it always has been coming to the front, changing, reinventing itself. And I expect that's going to be part of what we see over time with this. So it's a process, and new fans will come in and they'll love what's going on now. And, for guys like Dick and I, or girls like you and others, maybe it's about the racing. But when you go to Monaco, when you go to Las Vegas, when you go to Miami, and even really to COTA, because COTA has great entertainment facilities very close to the track. It's not an isolated track like so many of the permanent circuits are. Silverstone getting in and out used to be a 3-hour process just because of the roads and because of its distant location.
Yeah.
So to some extent, the value proposition is bringing the race to a more metropolitan setting, and it's more about, for newer fans, it's more about, okay, we're going to the racetrack during the daytime, but where's the music? Where's the food? Where's the dancing? Where's everything else for the evening? So we're all becoming part of the glitterati and the show. So that's I think what Liberty Media is transitioning from the Bernie Ecclestone era, when it was just hardcore racing. This is more of an entertainment focus.
Yep.
Like almost making what had been like kind of this elite group unattainable, is almost making those of us who are not able, or those who are not necessarily in that group, to feel like it's attainable now. Is that what you would say?
Yeah.
But the $4,000 going back to the Las Vegas though, Dick, that $4,000 still kind of keeps a lot of us out of that.
Yep. I mean, it's really funny. John and I have a mutual friend who's originally from New Zealand. He lives in Austin now. But after the Miami race, I got this phone call that it was just this blue streak monologue for about 15 minutes about how disgusted he was with Miami because it was all a bunch of posers and the wine and cheese set. And nobody actually cared about Formula One. They were there to see and be seen. And I have to tell you, this guy is hardcore. But he's also the same guy who was at Monza when, Enzo Ferrari called up Mario to come drive in the Italian Grand Prix after Didier Pironi had his huge accident. Mario goes out, hadn't sat in a Formula One car in like a year and a half, something like that, sticks it on pole, and then, does some sort of a burnout down the main straight, and literally 300,000 Italians just rioted. And this was Saturday, for qualifying. And so he understands the difference between the crowd in Miami versus the absolutely wound up crazy Italians from 35 years ago who are, their native son coming back and doing his thing in front of his countrymen. That's the difference, right? And of course, Italy's a whole different story as well. But hopefully, I'm making the point. It's a different deal. I mean, for Las Vegas, they don't even have a support race. It's just F1, and it's sort of like, that's not, how do you showcase the young talent that's coming up if you don't have a support race? Well, the answer apparently is that the organizers, which is Liberty, they don't particularly care about the young talent coming up, maybe.
John, do you have a response to that or thoughts on that?
Well, I think Dick may have a point. They may not have thought about it in a holistic way, because I think that they definitely have an interest in raising up the new drivers, but I don't think that they are yet focused on that aspect of the sport. What I think they're really focused on is making the very best entertainment or show that they can, and they'll worry about the rest later. And to some extent, I don't think that's a big problem for them in the near term, because drivers' careers are so much longer now. And so the current crop of drivers in Formula One, with people maybe like Lewis and Bottas, or a few of those, they're going to be aging out before too terribly long. But a good number of them, like Lando and Max and others, they're going to be there for 10 years. So they don't really need to worry too much about that. And really, that's the team's problem, if you want to get right down to it. It's not Liberty's problem.
I hadn't really thought of it like that. That is a very interesting perspective about thinking about it, both on the amount of time these drivers still have because of the youngness of the grid, that could kind of keep it as a holding pattern for anybody who's trying to come up. And so you don't need to, and maybe there's also a level of the drive to survive aspect of this, that is, I know that I read, and maybe you guys have more insight, that some are saying that drive to survive's relevance or the energy is not really going to be able to continue much longer. So while you have American attention, get their eyes and incentivize them to come to this and to start to see this as part of their sports world. Because I guess we also should keep in mind that it's competing. Formula One is competing in America with other racing options as well,
and other sports. Right.
Yeah,
Which, okay,
it's a really different milieu than in Europe, where for the most part you have basketball, you have football, soccer, rugby, and things like that, but you don't have as much competitive sport with automobile racing. And that's an advantage that they have, that when you come here, and in some places, I mean, like, if you go to China, what's sport like in China? I don't know for sure. Basketball, I guess, but they don't have a huge sports culture.
No.
Okay, so then that makes me think about like history. And from what I understand, there have been other iterations. Like COTA is not the first US based Grand Prix. So, and in my research even made me aware that there was one in Dallas. So what are y'all's thoughts about the other places that have hosted Grand Prix, why did they not succeed? Could they end up, if let's say the American market ends up becoming a great option for Formula One, could you see any of them coming back? Let me give that opportunity to John first.
I think that Watkins Glen could come back, although it's rather remote, which is why it went away, I think. Dallas won't come back. That was a horrible track. It was a one-year race. It was a great effort, but it wasn't a very interesting race, other than Mansell trying to push his car across the line.
That was brilliant.
Yeah. Completely illegal. He couldn't win by that, but it was brilliant to watch. Honestly, the other races, I mean, they are going back to Las Vegas. They were in Las Vegas previously, and they're going back. So I guess that's, somewhat answering your question. Can they come back? Apparently so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Dick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, of all the various places that have hosted F1 races in the United States, it started in Sebring. Well, that's not going to happen. Sebring is in the middle of orange groves in Central Florida. It takes forever to get there. And the track is rough and bumpy and all that kind of stuff. Amazing place for sports cars. Would never see it for Formula One. I'm like John, Watkins Glen's an amazing racetrack, but it's awfully remote. But what an amazing place to go. Indianapolis, you would think that Formula One would have found a home at Indy, but ever since, they started going through bank corners and exploding tires, that was taken off the list. They raced 2 or 3 years in Phoenix, through the streets of downtown Phoenix. Didn't work. And then there was the original iteration of Las Vegas, and that was there for a few years and then went away.
You had Detroit too, Dick.
Yeah, that's right. You had Detroit. And so, and again, now that's become an IndyCar race. And for that matter, we have Long Beach. That originally was, the first year was a Formula 5000 race. Then it was Formula One for several years, and then became IndyCar because, Formula One priced itself out of the market. So Formula One has a very interesting history in the United States. It's bounced all over the place. Whereas, with like in the UK, I mean, it was either basically Silverstone or prior to that, Brands Hatch. And that's where F1 lived, and occasionally there would be Donington Park or something like that. But I mean, that was very rare. So, but in the United States, of course, much bigger country, and they've tried to make a foothold, and it's been a struggle.
So do you have hopes that this could be sustainable, these newer ones, with this history that you just presented? I'll give that to you first, Dick, and then John.
I think that if you call it, say, 3 to 5 years, it's sustainable. After that, I would be kind of like, I think COTA is really going to stay kind of the home to the US Grand Prix. And these other circuits are going to be maybe a little bit questionable because the newness will wear off. I mean, the US Grand Prix, when it was West, I think is what they called it, when it was held in the parking lot at Caesar's Palace, after a while they realized, oh, wait a minute, people are more interested in going and hitting the slot machines. They won't come to the races, It's one of those kind of deals. So I think it's just going to be really interesting to see. Now, on the other hand, Miami, given that Miami is such a jumping off place for Latin America, I could see Miami being more sustainable than Vegas. I'd love to be wrong, by the way. I would really love to be wrong. But
John?
About Vegas. Yeah. Yeah, I just love to be wrong about Vegas.
Yeah. What about you, John?
I can't disagree very much with Dick on that. I think that Miami has legs. I think Las Vegas may suffer from the latest, greatest new flashy object, and so it won't last for a long time. But it's kind of a thing that, for the most part, I think only after a Grand Prix is in existence in a particular facility for over 10 years can you really consider that it's making it, because typically they'll either do a 5 or a 10-year contract, and if if it's not really going anywhere, either for the owner, Liberty in this case, or for the track promoter, then it's not going back. So that would be the problem, I think, with trying to predict what's going to be sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so go back.
Street races are expensive.
No, go ahead, Dick. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no. It's all good. I just think that you think about the infrastructure that is necessary to run a race, say in Vegas, where everything is temporary, right? And it's not only moving in the barriers and grandstands and all that, it's all the other stuff that has to be moved in. The only thing that's permanent are the garages. And so it's going to be incredibly expensive year over year unless they're just packing the place. And I'm sure that the first few years they'll pack the place. And if it's a good race and it provides, a lot of entertainment for people and all that, they'll be back, Interesting sidebar, we've been talking about the money in Vegas. A buddy of mine who does a lot of work with various sports and entertainment facilities. He actually did all the technology that was installed at COTA. And so he's very familiar with all of this stuff. He was in Vegas not too long ago, and he stayed at the Cosmopolitan. And he had this room, and he said, man, it was an amazing room, had a balcony, all this kind of jazz. And, he was put up by, whoever it was that had brought him out there to consult with him. And so he was pretty sure that it was more than any $300 a night kind of room, at the Cosmo. And he went down and he talked to the person at the front desk and said, what does this room go for Grand Prix weekend? Because it had a balcony that overlooked the Strip, and it had the Bellagio fountains off to the side. And they said $75,000 for the weekend.
Wait a minute. Say that again?
$75,000 for the weekend for that room.
I'm trying to make sure I'm imagining the numbers correctly in my head. Are you saying 7.5, a comma, and then 3 zeros for one night?
That's correct. No. That's for the weekend.
The weekend.
Oh, yeah. No, it's not that expensive.
Oh my, but still the weekend, that's like some people's annual salary.
Right.
Oh
and
my.
That's my point. Right.
Welcome to Formula One in the big time.
Yep.
Wow.
I don't know what a hotel room in Monaco costs, but I guarantee you it's, a small fortune.
Wow. That's And
so then here's the irony of it. And I'm just going to say something that's going to be super controversial. If you take away all the glitz and glamour, I promise you, if you're just a hardcore racer and you want to go see really, really good racing, go to either of the two really, really big kart races that will be held in a parking lot in the Rio Suites in Vegas in late October and again in mid-November. You will see more hardcore racing, wheel-to-wheel, people getting angry with each other, doing everything they possibly can to win a $50 trophy. I promise you, it will be more aggressive. Just the naked aggression will be in full evidence there, more so than you would see at the Formula One race. But again, Formula One is Formula One, and I have a complete and utter respect for it. But I would love to see the F1 grid get put in like shifter carts and just go for it. Because I think those guys would they would lose their minds. They would be so angry with each other. It would be awesome.
Wow. My mind is like trying to process everything you just said right now.
Well, yeah. I mean, Sabrina, here's the thing. If you put those guys out there and then let's throw in like the top 20 shifter cart drivers just in the United States, they're all 16 years old and convinced that they're better than Lewis Hamilton. I mean, that's just the way it is. And they would rather crash than admit defeat, and so it would be absolutely spectacular.
Well,
Now,
that kind of sounds like the
there
stuff
do-
that I've been reading about true old school original Formula One in the early 30s and, pre-war racing.
Yeah,
It seems like that
sure.
it's going back to that, the basics of
Yep.
just really who's going to do the best technical driving.
Yep.
Okay. Final question, and then we're going to have to wrap things up. Is we mentioned it in passing, and I think because it's our home city, it makes me want to just unpackage a little bit of it. The race, the one time the US hosted a Grand Prix in Dallas. Tell me about that. John, I'll let you go first, and then Dick, you can close up, and then we'll wrap up today's conversation.
Awesome.
Well, a guy named Buddy Bourne had a tremendous idea, which was to bring together a race in Dallas and a Formula One race. And he organized this. It was run at the State Fair of Texas Fairgrounds. So it was a street track, but it was on fairgrounds. So it was not open to traffic. And it was centrally located very near downtown Dallas, as you know. And it was a spectacular event. The race was very interesting from the standpoint that the track began to break up because it was in August, if I remember correctly. It was very hot. The asphalt began to break up. They had to repave it overnight. Nigel Mansell car stopped just on the final straight before the finish. He was streets ahead. He got out of the car and started pushing the car to try and get it over the line, which is, as I said earlier, totally against the rules. But it was a fun event, and they had good supporting races, and it was well attended, but it just wasn't. There wasn't a market for it, just to be honest about it. And those of us who were race fans were there. I think maybe there were 80,000 people or something like that there. Could have been a great event, but it just, that area didn't get the kind of development dollars that they would later pour into it. If they had, it might have had legs, but it was an interesting experiment and a very costly one for Buddy.
Okay, Dick, your thoughts, your point of view.
So I was there as well. A karting buddy of mine and I blasted up from Houston, where I was living down there at the time, and came to the F1 race. We managed to sneak our way into the pits for Friday practice. So I've got some amazing photos of literally hanging over pit wall as Keke Rosberg and all the boys came in. Had literally at the time, I believe it was Michele Alboreto and Rene Arnoux was driving for Ferrari. They were given Ferraris by Ferrari of Dallas to go and show up in at the track. So we got to kind of ooh and ah over the Ferraris. And I got to see Senna in one of his very first races driving the Tolman, and Lauda and PK and all the guys. I mean, it was an amazing event, like John said. Hot. Oh my God, it was hot. Whoever thought having a race in the summertime in Dallas was a good idea ought to be shot. I mean, that was horrible. And like John said, the track was breaking up and all that kind of jazz. And this was in the day of, not a whole lot of downforce and 1,000 horsepower. And how those guys kept it sort of pointed straight is beyond me. The other thing that I would add is that when Mansell was pushing his car or trying to push his car over the finish line, I think his car had run out of gas. He fainted from the heat.
Oh, wow.
And his rear tire ran him over. But it was then that I thought, yeah, I like this guy.
That's right.
He's my kind of guy, but I mean, and of course, only a few years later, the Italians, embraced him as their own and named him Ilione, because it's a lion, because that's just the kind of guy he was. So anyway, yeah, quite an event. Sorry it didn't happen again, but, probably wasn't such a bad thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
I know I said
Oh, it
that
was
would be the
great.
final thought, but so let's consider this like point B to that question. Do you think it could ever come back? I mean, with the development that Dallas has done in those subsequent years, hosting a lot of other stuff,
Mm.
and obviously a different time of the year. I agree. I don't know who thought that was a bright idea to do anything in Texas
Yeah.
in August. I mean, come on. But could it be with
Horrible.
with the way the calendar now is, where you're racing later into the year? Could you squeeze one into the fall?
The problem with that is COTA. This would be
Right.
it'd be a fantastic experiment, and the guy who promoted it could lose more money than Buddy Boren and displace him for that honor.
Mm. Okay, yeah. I don't want to see
Yeah.
COTA. I really enjoy that track, and I think it's partially because it's here in Texas, but I just think it has so many things that I haven't been able to quite unpackage why I've enjoyed it. Maybe that'll be a different conversation to hear from you guys about the actual circuit itself. But it just seems like there's so many cool places that fun stuff happens, and you can see the drivers drive in ways that I just go, wow, that's really awesome skill that you guys have. And it showcases that it may be on other tracks that I see across the calendar. So I guess that's my final thought. I do see time is ending, so I will just ask that maybe we put that as a future conversation, COTA specifically, and maybe we'll just go through all the races and the circuits and discuss them and what makes them unique and the pros and cons of having that. What do you think?
Sure.
Sounds great.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for another educational and fun conversation about F1. And I look forward to the next time that we get to chat. That ends this conversation. But rest assured, we'll keep talking and you can keep listening in, because we're just two guys, a girl, and F1. For John, Dick, and me, thanks for listening.